If you're wanting to learn some creative new embroidery stitches, then you're in the right place. I created this video as a part 2 to my top 10 embroidery stitches for beginners. These stitches are a little more creative and a little more challenging, but I think you'll find that by seeing them demonstrated in real time, you're going to see that they're quite manageable and they are a wonderful addition to your embroidery stitches that you know. For those of you who are new here, I'm Julie and I like to use quilting and embroidery techniques to make fabric landscapes. My landscapes are layered fabric that is all hand stitched together. And then at the end of my landscapes, I like to add all of the details in with embroidery stitches. Most of the stitching that I do are very basic stitches, and I just use a combination of those stitches to make all kinds of details that I want to see. So I'll make flowers and grasses and sometimes trees and bushes and things like that. So I really wanted to show you some of these more creative stitches because I think they just give you a lot more variety of the things that you'll be able to stitch. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that I do not use an embroidery hoop. Because I like to work on landscapes, it really isn't practical to have my work in a hoop to stitch it. It just runs the risk of damaging some of the fabrics that are already in the piece. So when I demonstrate, I'm just going to be using a piece of my cotton sky fabric, and then I have ironed a piece of fusible woven interfacing in behind just to keep it a little bit stiffer, and that's exactly how I would do it in one of my landscapes. So I just like to hold it freehand. It works best for me. If you prefer to use a hoop, then you're welcome to do that. But for the demonstration, I'm just going to be holding my piece freehand. The other thing about my techniques is when I stitch, I tend to stitch from the top of the fabric. So because it's not in a hoop and I'm not using a hoop and stand, I tend to run my stitches so that my needle goes in and out on the surface of the fabric. It makes it easier for me to manage the stitching, and it also allows me to draw in the details as I'm stitching. So it might be a different looking process in terms of how I embroider, but I think you'll find if you try using my techniques the way I do it, you might find it's just an easier way to stitch. So let's get into it. These are just some of my favorite creative stitches. So the first creative stitch I want to show you is called a Bullion Stitch. And this is a stitch that I like to use in flowers mostly, and sometimes I use it as seed pods or that kind of thing in grasses. I'm going to use a pearl cotton for this stitch because it does help if you use a thread that's, I want to say, a little bit slippery, and pearl cotton has such a nice smooth stitch ability to it. So we're going to use a pearl cotton, and that's a size 8. So a size 8 pearl cotton is very similar to if I was using, say, 2 strands of a 6-strand embroidery floss. Okay, so we're going to use pearl cotton. Oh, hang on. What did I do with my, oh, here it is. I don't want to lose my thimble. I always use a thimble when I'm stitching. So, okay. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to show you how I tie my knots. I just cut that back off. So when I'm holding my needle that is being threaded, take the end of your thread, put the end of the thread in between your needle and your finger, wrap twice, and then grab that wrap with your thumb and pull the needle through, and you'll end up with a perfect knot on the end of your thread. Okay, so I'm just going to grab my thimble. So because when I use a bullion stitch, I usually use it in flowers, I'm just going to mark on my piece of fabric here. This is a Frixion pen, which is erasable with heat. So I'll iron afterwards if there's anything that I need to iron over. So I'm just going to make a couple of sort of ideas of where I want this stitch. So say that's in a plant. So the way a bullion stitch works is you come up, I generally come up at the bottom of the stitch. Then what you want to do is put your needle through to whatever the length of the bullion stitch is that you want. So I'm going to do it the entire length there. And then make the tip of your needle come back up very close to where you came out in the first place. It's not the exact same spot, but it's very close. So then I'm going to hold my needle in there, and with this hand, you take your thread and you're going to wrap the needle. So I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going with 8. Let's just see. I'm going to slide these down. You want the amount of wraps to be about the same distance as the distance that your stitch is. So I'm kind of eyeballing it here. I might need one more, so I'm just going to wrap it one more time. Then what you want to do is gently hold these stitches with your fingers just to not lose the wrap. And you're going to push the needle through a little bit. Now I'm going to grab it and you kind of jiggle it a little just to get it through the wrap. Hang on, just got to get it through there. It's pretty tightly wrapped. Okay, so then we pull and I'm keeping my fingers loosely around that wrap. And then what you do is you start to let go. And as you're pulling your thread through, that wrap of stitches is going to become just this cute little knotted stitch. Do you see what I'm saying there? And so you kind of have to finesse the stitch a little bit with your fingers. And then the way you tack it is you take your needle and you go back down somewhere near the end there. And that is a bullion stitch. So I'll show you another one. I'm going to do another one right here. So come up at the base. Then the length of your bullion pod, whatever you want, is going to be how long you make this. So I'm going to go right to the top of where I've marked it. And then bring your end of your needle back up right near the base. It's about the same height. So I'm going to wrap it, I think that was 9 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to slide these down and we'll take a look. Yeah, that looks really good. Now these wraps, they kind of have to feel a little bit tight, but you don't want to over tighten them because then it's hard to pull your needle through. So then we're going to just hold that gently with your hand and pull your needle through, give it a bit of a shake. And as soon as you get it to pull through, you'll see that the wrap stays right where you had it. And then you just keep pulling your stitch till your thread gets tighter. And there's your little bullion stitch. Then you have to send your thread back through to the back. So I'm going to take a stitch down at the end. So the stitches like this, when they have a bit of dimension to them, you can always, if you wanted those to be curved, you could always come up beside it. And I do this sometimes if I want a pod to look a certain way. And you can always tack it like down to one side, if that helps. Like if that's going to hold it the direction that you wanted it to go. So I'll often use a number of those together in a plant. I'm going to do one more. This one I'm just going to freehand it. Come up, take a stitch, and then make the end of your needle come out right next to where you came up in the first place. And got to grab my thread. Gonna wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's pretty close. I'll go one more. And then slide your needle through, give it a bit of a shake. And as you're pulling it through, just guide it with your fingers so that you don't let that whole wrap go. It's amazing how it eventually just sort of pulls itself straight, but sometimes you have to just sort of finesse it a little. Once you've got your knot, then you put the needle back through and secure the end there. I always tie things off. I am an embroiderer who believes in knots, but that's because everything I do gets covered up anyways, so. And that's the bullion stitch. So this next stitch is a fairly common stitch, but it has a lot of versatility to it. So I like to use it in a few different ways when I'm working on embroidery. It's called the buttonhole stitch. So a traditional buttonhole stitch, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to mark in a bit of a line. If I was doing a traditional one, this sometimes it's called a blanket stitch, and they do this along the edge of a blanket. So you come up on the line, and then what you do is you turn your needle so that it's vertical, like perpendicular to the line. So you're going to do a stitch down, and your thread has to be behind the needle. And then what's going to happen is when you take that stitch, you see how you just create a link so that your stitch keeps going. There's a lot of embroidery stitches that work that way. So what you can do is just keep taking those vertical stitches, and you're going to create a whole line of what's called the buttonhole stitch. Now this can be kind of fun, especially if you are varying the heights. You can put little flowers on the tops of each of these or something like that. But I'm going to show you what I like to do with a buttonhole stitch, and it's called a closed buttonhole stitch. So I'm just going to finish this off. What you need to do, if you don't tack it down, you're going to lose that last stitch. So I just like to send my needle right back on the other side of the thread there, and that's going to hold that stitch down. So let me just tie this off, and I'm going to show you what a closed buttonhole stitch looks like. Oh, it's the magnetic. Okay, so for my closed buttonhole stitch, it looks a little bit more like a flower, so I'm going to use a nice pink colored pearl cotton. This is another size 8 pearl cotton, but they're great for embroidery. Gosh, they're just such smooth threads to stitch with. Okay, so size 8 pearl cotton. I'm going to make my knot on the end. Now with a closed buttonhole stitch, they make a really nice flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the shape of the flower that I want to make. So I'm going to make a big circle here just to give you the demonstration. Okay, so with a closed buttonhole stitch, actually I'm going to mark the center of that circle too. That'll make it easier to see. The way that it works is you come up on the edge of your flower, and then you need to make a bunch of these interlocking stitches. But what you do if it's a flower is you go to the center, take your needle in there, and your stitch is going to come back up right on the line of the flower. Now you can make it as small or as big as you want that space, and that will determine the size of the petals, I suppose you could call them, on the flower. So I'm going back in at the center and coming back up. I'm trying to make these even stitches. So watch how my thumb is controlling that thread all the time. And so by having that thread under my thumb, I know when I put my needle into the center and up along the edge that this thread is always going to be behind my needle And it has to be in order to make that stitch work. Okay, so I'm going to keep going around this flower with these stitches. You go in at the center and out on the center, on the outer line. And I keep rotating my fabric. You can see why I don't work well with a hoop, right? And I'm trying to loosely fold up my fabric there. I sort of roll it under my hand to not crease it too badly. But I definitely like to move my fabric and rotate it to make those stitches easier to do. Okay, so let me just keep on going here. I'm trying to evenly space them out, so hopefully it works out. I think it will. So you go down at the center and up. And it does start to be a lot of threads in the center, but that's okay. Keep coming. Oh, what is happening here? My thread's kind of falling apart there. I'm not sure why. Go down in the center. I think I'm actually just going to make this one last stitch. It's maybe not perfectly even, but it's not terrible. Okay, so then once you've hit that last stitch, you do need to tack this down. So what oh, I don't want to pull it too tight. If you ever do pull it too tight and you're like, oh, that did not work out, you can always put your needle under there and loosen it up again. Okay, and I'm going to tack that last petal down just by putting my needle just on the other side of the thread and tying it through to the back. Just going to tie that off. And so that's a closed buttonhole stitch. Now, the other way that I like to do a closed buttonhole stitch is if I'm ever doing like little, I want to say little flowers like a fuchsia or sometimes daffodils I use these in, or little buttercups. So I'll just show you how I would do that. You don't need to do a full circle. So I'll just show you. I'm going to do a couple of little flowers, but I'm going to draw a triangle instead. So I'm just going to do a couple. So with these, I'm also going to come up on the outside corner. So I'm going to start up at the top here. And then what I'm going to do is the point of the flowers where I go in and then I come back up. Right up along the edge. And that is going to catch that thread. I'm going to take another one. And these can be very small stitches up at the top, like they can be quite close together. So I'm just going to keep on taking those little stitches. And then when I get to the bottom of my flower here, I'm going to go down, and I still would like to close in that outside edge. So I'll just come up and do one straight stitch on the end just to close that in. And isn't that cute? Like, it's just such a pretty flower. I'll just tie this one off. Okay, let me do one more. This one I'll do in a bright pink. Oh, did I make it? Good. I don't always get that first try. I'm finding it's more and more important to me that I use sharp needles that have a larger eye, just because I have had it with needles that are difficult to thread. I just get rid of them. I just, they can't live at my house if they have really tiny eyes. Okay, so I came up on the outside edge, down at the point, and then I'm going to come back up along the outside edge, with my thumb controlling the thread so that the needle is always going to be over top of that. And by holding my thumb on it, it just reminds me that that's how that has to be stitched in order to make the next petal. So I'm going down at the center and up along the edge, and it's going to keep on creating that, I want to say that chain. It is kind of a chain of a closed blanket stitch. I'm going to go up on the edge. And then when I get to this end, in order to keep that petal where it is, I need to tack this down by going down on the other side of the thread. So sending my thread to the back. There we go. And then I'm still going to come up and close in that far side of that flower, just with a straight stitch. There we go. And I'll just tie this last one off. But that is how you do a buttonhole stitch and also a closed buttonhole stitch. So this next stitch is a really cool stitch. It's called the cast on stitch. So I'm going to use another color of pearl cotton. Just grab this needle. That was a good needle. So with a cast on stitch, it's a little bit tricky at first when you go to start it. But once you get the hang of it, it's one of those stitches that everyone is going to ask you, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Because it's a really cool stitch. I like it in flowers. I've used it before making geraniums, that kind of thing. And it's wonderful for that. So the way you begin it, it's a bit similar to these bullions. So I'm going to just, I know I don't really need to draw this, but I'm going to make a couple of them, assuming it's part of a geranium plant. Okay, so you're going to come up on one end. And then what you're going to do is similar to that bullion stitch. I'm going to put my needle back in on the end of where I want that flower to end and come back out really close to where we came out in the first place. Okay, so that's about how long the stitch will be. Now, the best way to actually do this stitch is to then kind of let go of your needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the thread fairly taut with this hand. It just makes it easier for me to cast on because it's called a cast on stitch, and that's literally what you're doing. So you're putting your finger under, you're going to twist your finger and then put that on the needle. Okay, I'll do that again. Underneath, twist your finger, and then put it on the needle. And so for those of you who know how to knit, this will look familiar. So you're putting your finger under, twist your finger, and put it on the needle. You are casting on stitches onto the needle. So keeping that nice and taut, your finger goes underneath, twist, and then onto the needle. You're going to need to do this multiple times because it is not the most obvious way of stitching or of twisting. Once you get it, it's actually not that hard. So underneath, twist, and put it on the needle. Now you can see all of those stitches sort of building up on there, and you want the amount of stitches to kind of match the amount of space. It's very similar to that first stitch we did. So I'm going to do one more, and I think that's about enough. So then what you're going to do is you're going to gently hold these. You just don't want them to like fall off the end of your needle. And you're going to push your needle all the way through. And this is another one where you kind of have to jiggle it a little. And you pull it through. And all of those cast on stitches are then going to become just this nice little dimensional, I want to say it's a knot because it's kind of a knot of stitches, but it's really just a whole bunch of cast on stitches that become your stitch. So that's the cast on stitch. So I'll do a second one. And so I like to do these quite close together when I'm doing them because it makes it look more like they might be all sort of part of the same plant. So you come up and then go back down a little ways over. That's about maybe how long I want it. I'll go to the end of where I drew that line. Come back up very close to where you went in the first place. Okay, and then now we got to cast on all our stitches. So we're going to hold it nice and sort of snug. We go underneath, twist, and on the needle. Underneath, twist, on the needle. Say it with me. Underneath, twist, on the needle. Just kidding. Underneath, twist, and on the needle. And you just keep on doing that. I even have to say it to myself sometimes because otherwise I end up twisting the wrong direction or something. And it's like, it's so crazy. Underneath, twist, on the needle. Underneath, twist, on the needle. Underneath, twist, on the needle. Okay, so that looks like about enough stitches to match that space. So what I'm going to do then is hold these with my thumb and we're going to push that needle through. Give it a little bit of a jiggle. Actually, that one came through nice and easy. And you kind of have to use both hands, like you finesse it a little bit as your stitch is coming together. And there's your second one. And then you take your stitch down through the fabric right at the end of that. So that's the cast on stitch. This next stitch is called the Herringbone Stitch. And it's sort of a version of the herringbone. It's a much tighter stitch. And I like to use it when I'm making leaves. It's a very good filler stitch for something like a leaf. So this time I'm using a heavier weight pearl cotton. This is a size 5. And you could also just use the whole 6 strands of an embroidery floss, but I find because I use it as a filler stitch, it's better if it's done with a thicker thread. So I'm going to draw my leaf shape, sort of like this. And then I also want to, just for my own guidance, give myself sort of a second line that's just within the leaf shape. I'm going to mark in, this is the center of the stitch, of the leaf. And by marking that in, it's just going to make it easier for me to stay on track here with how this is going to look. So you come up just to the side of it. And I'm going to come down, I'm kind of cross into this side of the leaf and go into that guide stitch. And then okay, I'm going to push it right through just to make it easier to see. Then I'm going to come back up on the other side of that leaf, kind of in the same spot as I did on the opposite side. And I'm going to cross over this way, okay, to that top of that leaf. Now watch this. So then I'm going to come down just a little bit of space. I try to keep these stitches fairly tight together when you're coming up. And then I'm going to cross over again and just go just below this one. And instead of pulling it all the way through, I'm going to bring my needle up right beside the stitch at the top where I know I'm coming out again. So this is an example of me stitching from the face side of my fabric instead of always pulling, having a hand at the back. Okay, so I've come up there. I got to cross over again. So I'm going to cross over onto that line and then bring my needle up right beside where I'm stitching over there. So I'm just going to keep on crisscrossing, and you're going to see how this really nice textured pattern sort of appears. It's a nice woven look. It looks a little bit like um, a fishbone stitch. So I'm gonna keep going. Your stitches down here where your needle goes in don't have to be nearly as close together as your stitches that are along the edge where your needle comes up, because they all kind of get covered over. But if you want to fill in your stitch or fill in your leaf nicely, you have to make the points along the outside edge fairly close together. So I'm just going to keep on overlapping. And as we work our way down, you start to see that leaf take shape. Oh, I gotta pull my one end through. Oh, wrong side. I often will use my thumb and squeeze my stitches a little just to make sure I'm not pulling them too tight. Because you don't want to do that. That's the one downside about not using a hoop, is that sometimes you do pull your stitches too tight. So just be cautious not to do that, and use your thumb to sort of flatten out the stitches. Yeah, it totally looks like a fishbone. But I believe that is a whole other stitch. I'm going to run out of thread here pretty soon. But it's actually quite easy with this stitch to just tie on a whole new thread. So I'm just crossing over onto that little and then up onto the edge. I think this is going to end up being my last stitch. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to take my point down and tie it off. Come on. A new thread. Just going to tie a knot in that. And now I need to come up my last stitch. Oh, I missed that knot. Hang on. My last stitch, I ended right, I went down there. So I'm just going to come up where I would have come up. Side. And I just sort of keep going crisscross until we get the whole shape filled in. And I'll show you at the end, because you do get to a point where you, I'll show you, where you get to this point and you still have to fill in the sides of the leaf. We're almost at that point. Crossing over. I'm going to start pulling it through to the back, I think. It's getting harder and harder to just keep stitching from the front. Okay, so now I can see I need to still fill in a little bit here. Take that right to the bottom. I might need one extra stitch on that side. But look how pretty that is. I'm still going to go as far into the center as I can. Yeah, and I'll probably fill it in with one more. Oh, I'm going to go in further. There we go. And so that is how I do the herringbone stitch. It just makes for such a pretty textured flower leaf. This next stitch is an interesting one. It's called a woven wheel. It's a version of doing like a spider web, but I'm going to show you. It's a stitch that I like to use for making flowers, like something like a rose. So I need to know the center of this. And the trick with this one is you need an odd number of spokes to your wheel. So I'm using a 6-strand embroidery floss just because it's a little heavier. It's just a nice color of yellow. It's This kind of stitch actually works better if you have thicker threads. So I'm going to come up on the outside edge and I'm going to my first one, I'm going to just go completely across. I just got to build some spokes on this wheel before we start filling it. So I'm going to come up and go across. And I want the center of this wheel to obviously be kind of in the center of the circle. So I'm trying to be fairly accurate with getting my stitches to cross in the center. And you don't have to go all the way across. You could just be you could be ending it at the center every time. In fact, I think I might do that this time because I'm going to split the other side a bit unevenly just to get an odd number of spokes. So I'm going to go down there. I'm kind of bringing my threads all to the center to sort of pin them in place. Okay, so once you've got your stitches, your spokes of your wheel, and there's an odd number, you can do this with like a more of a blunt needle, which might actually be easier. I'm going to keep using this needle. It's not too bad, but what you want to do is come up right near the center. And you want to weave your thread over and under the spokes of the wheel. And don't pull too tight when you are doing these. So I'll just show you. So I'm going to go over this one under here. Then it's going to be over this one under here. Over. And then this one's going to be under and over and under and over. And so basically you are just weaving around the wheel over, under, but don't pull your thread tight because you want it to sort of give some dimension to it. And if you pull it too tight, it's kind of defeats the purpose. It gets so flat. This is a great stitch to try with silk ribbon. If you are going to try embroidery with silk ribbon, it works beautifully with silk ribbon. Okay, so I'm going under, over, under, over. Let's see if I can get another one in here. Under. And you see how I'm just sort of giving it enough slack. I don't want to say too much slack because it's not like loopy, but at the same time it's not so tight that it's pulling it really flat. So over, under, kind of getting about halfway. Takes a while when your flower is pretty big. It's going to look like a bit of a basket weave. So over, under, over, under. Kind of looks like a sun now with the spokes sticking out. But we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep going until all of the spokes are covered. So that's over and then under, over, under, under. Gosh, I'm going to end up using my entire piece of thread. I thought maybe I cut it too long, but I definitely did not. Over, under. I'll kind of keep moving it around. Look how cute that is already. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I made the decision to record these videos in real time because a lot of the videos that are out there are sped up, and sometimes that is not easy to follow when they are sped up. And this is such a slow process, but that's what's so great about it. I think that's why I love it, is it takes a long time, but I don't know. It's time well spent. Okay. Oh, I'm almost at the end of my thread. Okay, I'm going to go over, under. I might want a little more thread to finish this off. And I think I am going to take more thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tuck this in to the back so that I can tie it without it being too noticeable. I'll use my needle a little to finesse my little flower, but you can see it really coming together here. I'm going to cut a little more. Actually, I need to tie this off for sure so that it doesn't get in the way and doesn't pull out. Okay, so I'm going to tie this off. Oh. And let's get going with my new thread. Now, it's really actually not that difficult to start and stop a new thread on this because you just have to go back and look at what your last stitch was and whether it was over or under. So I can see, I think I tied it off, yeah, somewhere up here at the top. So I came down there. So I'm just going to come up right behind that and keep going. But if you can see that this stitch, the last thread went under it, you know you're going to go over it. Okay, so over, under. Just doing a couple more here. Over, under, under. This is a pretty big flower. Then we go over, under, over, under, over, under. There we go. Over, under. We're almost there. Oh my gosh. Okay. I always like to cover all of the spokes. Then you can't even really tell how the flower was made. So we're going to just keep on going until we can't see the spokes anymore. And even once you can't see the spokes, then I still even do a couple stitches around the outsides. Over. There we go. I do teach embroidery classes as well, and I think these videos are going to be nice for students who, you go home from your class and it's nice to have a video of how some of these stitches were done. So hopefully that will be helpful to those students as well. There we go. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now is there's just a few spots where I feel like I can squeeze in one more over or under. And you see how it's starting to just like pop off the fabric here? I was going to say pop off the page, but it's not a page. But it's really starting to show up nicely. So I'm going to tack it in there at that spot. And notice I'm not pulling tight. I'm kind of leaving it go. There's like a loose thread there, but that's okay. I think it'll work its way in. And I might still pop up just at the edge over here and add in one more little stitch just to keep a little bit of thread there that sort of sticks out on the outsides of this. Lovely. All we need to do is add some greenery around this. There. Okay, one more, and then I'm done. This one, I want it to come back this way. I'm going to just do one more stitch in here. There. And sometimes adding in those, single stitches around the outside really helps just to make it look that much more dimensional. So that is a woven wheel. So this last creative stitch is something that I think you're going to find useful, especially if you make landscapes. So this is called couching. And this type of stitch is great if you are the type of sewer who ends up with all of these fabulous, crazy yarns that you want to attach to your projects, but you're just not sure how to stitch them on because you end up with these types of yarns and there's just no way that you can stitch these through to the back of a fabric without damaging them. So this is called couching. So what I'm going to do, this is like a wired ribbon. It's an eyelash ribbon. But what it's just such a neat, these kind of ribbons are such neat additions to landscapes, especially. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a piece of it and I'll show you how couching works. So with couching, you can use just regular thread, regular sewing thread. So I generally use thread that is in the color or something that's going to match what you're stitching over. Okay, so I will often use couching for something like the uh, wire on a fence, like if I'm doing a fence in one of my landscapes, because oftentimes those metallic threads are difficult to stitch with and they get a little bit wrecked up as you're stitching. So it's actually easier if you can just couch them down. So I'm just going to use a dark brown thread. So with couching, you basically just place your yarn or your ribbon or whatever you want to use wherever you want it. And then what you're going to do is I like to work right to left when I'm doing stuff like this, but it really doesn't matter, whatever's easier. You're going to come up on one side of that heavy yarn, and then you just sort of make sure that everything's placed real tight. I came up on one side, and then I'm going to go down right on the other side of it, just actually tacking it in place. And then what I do is I get my needle to come up about, I would say like a centimeter, half an inch further down. Oh gosh, my wire. Hang on, this all pulled out. Okay, let's try that again. Just cut this off. Oh, this wire is crazy. Take two. Not sure if I'm going to cut that from the video or not. Oh my word. Okay, hang on. I'm going to pull that out. So we're going to pin it down. Gosh, it's very wiry. So it's kind of jumping all over the place. I'll move a little further down and I'll come back and pin it if I have to. So I'm going to come up on one side of the wire or the yarn or whatever it is I'm using. And then I'm going to go back down on the other side. And I'm coming up a little bit further. Let's make sure my thread actually closes around it. I caught a couple of the eyelashes. I'll pull those out. Okay, and then I'm going to go back. I came up on, am I on the top side? Yes. And I'm going to come back down on the other side. So I'm coming up on the top and down on the bottom. Then I'm moving just a little bit further. And couching stitches can be fairly far apart. Mine usually aren't any closer than about a ½ inch. Depends on what you're stitching. But it's basically just to tack your thread in place. Once you get a few stitches in, it's a lot easier, as in where I am now. Okay, so I'm tacking down that thread, so it's not going to go anywhere. But this also allows you to then manipulate this and say if I wanted it, I don't know why I would want this, but if I ever wanted it to be in a really tight curl like this, and I mean, you'd never be able to get it to stay with glue or something, you can just keep doing your couching stitches up and down on either side of a thread like that. And I'm actually popping over here to grab the end, and I'm going to tack that one down. And basically you're doing a whole bunch of little tack stitches along your thread. It just allows you to really, I want to say draw. It allows you to draw with these types of threads. And there are so many beautiful threads that sometimes you get them home and think, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to sew with that? But you don't always have to sew with them. You can sew them to whatever it is that you are working on. Okay. So I'm just going to keep going, and I go all the way around. When I'm doing couching, I'm usually pretty specific about making sure that I couch it in enough spots that it's not going to come apart and it's not going to move. Okay. Now I could finish couching it there, but I just want to show you the back side. So it's a whole bunch of these little, they're like little stitches, but they are tacking a fancy yarn. It's always a fancy yarn that you use couching on. So tacking a fancy yarn down so that you don't have to stitch it right through your fabric. So that's couching. So these are my favorite creative stitches. The Bullion Stitch, the closed buttonhole stitch, the cast-on stitch, herringbone stitch, a woven wheel or woven flower stitch, and this is couching. So have some fun practicing those stitches. Well, I hope that you enjoyed seeing those stitches. You are going to find that if you practice them a few times, they're really not that complicated. And the more you practice them, the more natural it becomes doing those stitches. If you haven't already seen my top 10 stitches for beginners, watch that video as well, because with the combination of these stitches as well as those top 10 stitches, you are going to have endless combinations of things that you can stitch, and you'll be able to create wildflowers and different grasses and things that you just want to see in your projects. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and check out some of the other videos that are there. I appreciate you being here, and bye for now.